At my SIL's wedding, my husband grabbed the mic. To show how much you mean to me, I'm giving you my wife's designer business. My SIL jumped up and shouted, "You always said she wasn't business material anyway." I clinked my glass and whispered, "Interesting choice of words." But 1 week later, my husband and SIL were standing outside my store, begging me to come back. "You can't seriously be mad about this," Damien said, standing at the edge of our kitchen like he didn't just publicly humiliate me. "You gave away my life's work like it was a party favor," I said quietly, folding another shirt into the suitcase. "It's not like that," he insisted. "It's a smart move. Vanessa can run it better than you can. She's more polished. We all win." "All of us?" I said, snapping the suitcase shut. Interesting choice of words. He opened his mouth again, but I was already grabbing my keys. He didn't know it yet, but I wasn't coming back. And a week later, he and Vanessa would be standing outside my store, desperate, humiliated, and very much alone. I, 42F, have been married to Damien, 45M, for 15 years. We live in Asheville, North Carolina, where I own a small but successful designer boutique called Indigo Fern. I built it from nothing, started with weekend craft fairs, then a little Etsy shop, then finally scraped together enough for a real brick-and-mortar store downtown. My business is my pride. It's where I found confidence, independence, and, honestly, a version of myself I never got to be when I was just someone's wife. Damien was supportive, in a smile for the pictures, roll his eyes later kind of way. At least, that's what I came to realize over time. Early on, he told friends proudly that I was a business owner. Later, he started slipping in little comments about how Marissa just plays dress up for a living or how, thank God, my real estate income supports us both. The truth was, Indigo Fern had become profitable enough that I didn't need him financially. And maybe he didn't like that. I don't know. I only know the man I thought I married slowly eroded into someone I barely recognized. Vanessa, his sister, 38F, had always been competitive. She worked in corporate marketing, which she never let anyone forget, especially not me. Over holidays, she'd make barbed little remarks about my art projects or how real businesses had balance sheets and boards of directors. Still, we maintained a tense, distant civility. I tolerated her because family was supposed to mean something. Foolish of me, in hindsight. When Vanessa got engaged last year to some bland finance bro from Charlotte, the whole family went into overdrive. Wedding plans were extravagant, estate venue, custom everything, white glove service at the reception. I wasn't surprised when Damien got swept up in the excitement. What surprised me was how much. The day of the wedding was warm and sticky. I wore a navy blue dress I made myself, simple, elegant, nothing that could possibly offend Vanessa's sense of the spotlight. Everything felt normal at first. The ceremony was the usual parade of tears and tulle. The reception was extravagant. Damien seemed off. Nervous, maybe. He drank more than usual. I chalked it up to the open bar and let it go. I was used to smoothing over his rough edges. Then came the speeches. Toasts from the parents, the maid of honor, the best man. Laughter, clinking glasses, all the typical noises of a wedding. I thought we were winding down when Damien stumbled up to the microphone, sloshing whiskey over the rim of his glass. I froze. I knew that look, the one he got when he thought he was about to be the hero of the night. "Vanessa," he started, smiling too wide, voice just a little too loud, "you've always been like a second daughter to me." Confused murmurs. Vanessa tilted her head, smiling nervously. "And to show you how much you mean to me, I'm giving you something special. I'm giving you." He paused for dramatic effect, "my wife's designer business." The room went dead quiet. At first, people thought it was a joke. A weird, unfunny one. But then Vanessa jumped up from her table, cheeks flushed with excitement, and shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. You always said she wasn't business material anyway. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. I sat there, frozen, my mind whirring, heart hammering against my ribs. I forced a smile, clinked my champagne glass against the edge of the table, leaned over to Damien, and whispered. Interesting choice of words. Then I stood up, smoothed my dress, and walked out. I didn't wait to see anyone's reaction. I didn't care. Somewhere behind me, the band awkwardly started playing again. Back home, the quiet buzzed in my ears. I opened my laptop, logged into every business account, changed every password. Froze all vendor orders. Reached out to my lawyer. Indigo Fern was solely registered under my name. Damien had no authority to gift it to anyone. Whatever documents he thought he'd signed or promises he'd made were meaningless without my signature. By the time Damien stumbled into our house the next morning, smelling like whiskey and stale cigar smoke, I was ready. He blinked in confusion when he saw the suitcase. "You're leaving?" he asked, like it was incomprehensible. I folded another sweater into my bag without looking at him. "Marissa, you're overreacting," he said, voice full of forced calm. "This is business. Vanessa can take it to the next level. We can all profit from it." "We? Or you too?" I asked, finally meeting his eyes. He flinched, just slightly. "Come on. It's not personal," he said. "It's smart." I zipped the suitcase shut. "Smart would have been keeping your mouth shut," I said. And then I walked out. For the next week, I went nuclear quietly. Changed the locks on the store. Alerted my vendors that all orders would be personally confirmed by me only. Froze the business bank accounts temporarily while my lawyer drafted protection letters. Filed a police report, just in case Damien or Vanessa tried something stupid. Meanwhile, word spread like wildfire. Asheville isn't a huge town, and Indigo Fern had a loyal following. My customers, many of whom I'd known for years, flooded my inbox with support. Orders tripled overnight. Friends dropped by the store with coffee, casseroles, hugs. Apparently, Vanessa tried to create her own design studio within a week. Damien fronted her some cash, thinking the name and reputation would transfer magically. Spoiler alert, it didn't. They had no inventory. No supplier relationships. No idea how much work it actually took to run a small, independent boutique. By the end of that disastrous week, I pulled into my shop one morning and found them both standing outside, Damien in a wrinkled suit, Vanessa in a rumpled dress, both looking utterly wrecked. They rushed toward me the moment they saw my car pull in. "Marissa, please," Damien said, voice cracking with desperation. "Let's just talk about this." Vanessa hovered behind him, arms crossed, avoiding my eyes. I stepped out of the car, keys in hand, and regarded them coolly. "I think you said everything you needed to," I said, voice even. Then I turned, unlocked the front door, and shut it firmly behind me. I didn't even look back. I didn't hear from Damien or Vanessa for a couple of days after that. I thought maybe, just maybe, they finally got the message. That the ship had sailed, burned, and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. That their little fantasy of owning my business without lifting a finger had crumbled under the weight of their own entitlement. But Damien didn't give up that easily. First came the emails. Long, rambling apologies mixed with excuses. He tried everything: flattery, guilt, manipulation. "I was just trying to help you grow. You don't understand how much pressure I've been under. It was one bad decision. 15 years of marriage deserves forgiveness, doesn't it?" I didn't respond. Not a single word. Then came the mutual friends, or, more accurately, the people who thought they were helping. "Maybe you should just sit down with him, hear him out," one said over coffee. "You two have built a life together," another insisted. "Surely it's worth salvaging?" I smiled, nodded, and changed the subject every time. They didn't know everything. They hadn't seen the way Damien's resentment had seeped into our marriage, slowly poisoning the well until there was nothing left but bitterness and control. The business stunt at the wedding? That wasn't a mistake. It was just the first time he'd been bold, or drunk, enough to do it out loud. One evening, about a week and a half after the wedding, I got home from a long day at the shop and found Damien sitting on my front porch. He looked awful. Eyes sunken, suit rumpled, like he hadn't been home in days. "Marissa, please," he said, standing up as I approached. "Just give me 5 minutes." I crossed my arms. "You have too," I said. He swallowed hard, wiped his palms down the sides of his pants like he was nervous. "I screwed up," he said. "I see that now. I was stupid. I was trying to secure something for our future. I thought if Vanessa ran it like a real business, we'd finally." "Finally what?" I asked sharply. "Finally turn me into your employee? Watch from the sidelines while you and your sister cashed the checks." He winced. Actual shame flickered across his face for half a second. "It wasn't like that," he mumbled. "But it was. And we both knew it." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just looked him dead in the eye and said, "The person I married would have been proud of me for building something of my own. You resent it. You always have." He tried to argue, but I walked past him, unlocked my door, and stepped inside without another word. He stood there on the porch for a few minutes. I watched him through the peephole. Eventually, he slumped down the stairs and disappeared into the night. The divorce papers were served 2 weeks later. It wasn't amicable. I didn't expect it to be. Damien fought ugly. Claimed he was entitled to half of Indigo Fern's value because it had been built during the marriage. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Yvette who had clearly seen this exact behavior 100 times before, made quick work of his arguments. The boutique had always been my separate property. I'd used inheritance money from my grandmother to start it, and every investment into it since had come directly from its own profits. There wasn't a penny of Damien's money in it. Still, he dragged it out. Filed motions, demanded audits, tried to slow the process to a crawl hoping I'd cave just to get it over with. I didn't. Every time I walked into court, I thought about all those nights I stayed up late designing, sewing, managing the books, learning marketing from scratch. I thought about every customer who'd trusted me with their weddings, anniversaries, birthdays. And I thought about the sound of Damien's voice into that microphone at Vanessa's wedding, giving away my life's work like it was his to give. It steeled my spine every time. Meanwhile, Vanessa's studio failed spectacularly. She tried to spin it as a pivot on social media, claiming she was taking time to rebrand, but everyone knew. Asheville's creative community is tight-knit. Word traveled. Suppliers blacklisted her. Potential customers vanished. Damien must have sunk a lot of his savings into her venture, because soon after the divorce proceedings started, I heard through the grapevine that he had to sell his car, the fancy BMW he loved showing off, and move into a cheaper rental. Poetic justice, really. Through it all, I kept showing up to Indigo Fern every day. The work kept me sane. It reminded me who I was outside of being Damien's wife. It anchored me when the nights got long and the loneliness crept in. There were hard days, of course. Days when the grief of it all, not just the betrayal, but the sheer waste of what we'd built together, sat so heavy on my chest I thought it might crush me. But I got through them. One appointment, one sale, one new design at a time. Friends came back into my life, the real ones. The ones who didn't disappear at the first sign of scandal. I started spending weekends hiking the Blue Ridge trails again, something I hadn't done in years. I remembered how it felt to breathe air that wasn't heavy with someone else's resentment. For the first time in a long time, I was living for myself. The divorce dragged on for months. Damien pulled every cheap stunt he could. He requested delays, sent last-minute filings, even tried to paint me as unstable because I had once vented to a friend about how overwhelmed I felt. My lawyer, Yvette, dismantled every pathetic argument he threw at us. With quiet, relentless professionalism, she laid out the truth: I had built Indigo Fern alone. I had kept the books, paid the taxes, filed every legal form. Damien had been nothing but a bystander. When the final court date arrived, I wore a dark green suit and a simple necklace my grandmother had left me. I felt calm. Strong. Damien looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His lawyer, a harried man who clearly regretted taking him on as a client, shuffled papers nervously. The judge didn't even take long to rule. Ms. Turner retains full ownership of Indigo Fern, she said, voice crisp and certain. Mr. Turner has no claim to the business or its assets. And just like that, it was over. The papers were signed. The marriage was officially dissolved. My business was untouchable. I walked out of the courthouse into a bright spring afternoon, the kind where the air smells fresh and the sun feels like a blessing. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in, feeling free in a way I hadn't realized I'd been craving for years. Of course, Damien and Vanessa weren't done embarrassing themselves. Within weeks of losing the court case, Vanessa tried to launch a new boutique. She must have been desperate because she attempted to call it Fern Indigo. I laughed when I saw the website, a clumsy, half-finished mess with badly lit photos and awkward knockoff versions of my designs. And here's where it gets satisfying. I didn't call her. I didn't confront her. I didn't need to. I called my lawyer. Within 48 hours, Vanessa received a cease and desist letter for trademark infringement. Turns out, I'd registered Indigo Fern, name, logo, branding, years ago when I first started gaining traction. She couldn't even use the word fern in any retail capacity related to fashion without violating it. Her site was taken down within a week. Her Instagram disappeared a few days later. Poof. Gone. Word spread fast around Asheville's business circles. Vanessa and Damien became walking cautionary tales about arrogance and entitlement. Suppliers blacklisted her completely. Vendors refused to work with either of them. Even the family started pulling away. Apparently, several cousins who owned small businesses themselves decided they didn't want anything to do with a couple who tried to steal and sabotage someone's livelihood. Last I heard, Damien had been fired from his real estate firm. Turns out, being publicly humiliated in a town as interconnected as Asheville isn't great for business. No one wanted to work with a man who thought contracts were optional and partnerships were just opportunities for betrayal. He moved into a dingy one-bedroom apartment across town. Vanessa went back to corporate marketing, at an entry-level position. Not exactly the glamorous entrepreneur life she'd imagined. Meanwhile, Indigo Fern thrived. That summer, I opened a second location in Charleston, South Carolina. Smaller, but just as full of heart. I hired a couple of young designers from local art schools, eager, passionate, full of ideas. I mentored them the way no one had mentored me. Business was booming. Life was blooming. One afternoon, about 6 months after the divorce, I was setting up a display at the Asheville store when a familiar figure walked past the window, Damien. He didn't see me. He looked small. Not physically, he was the same tall, broad man he'd always been, but like a shadow of himself. Shoulders slumped, head down, shuffling along the sidewalk like he was just trying not to be noticed. For a second, a tiny part of me ached for the man I once loved. For the years we'd spent building a life I thought was real. But only for a second. Because the life I had now, the peace, the pride, the genuine happiness, was something I had carved out for myself. No one gave it to me. And no one could ever take it away. I turned back to my display, adjusted the flowers in the window, and smiled. I had weathered the storm. And I had won.